Welcome, guys. We are
Yeah,
back.
another day. We are on a good Monday night, and today we want to figure out well, not actually us, but the common question is was it just a story, a myth, a fairy tale? Over 500 witnesses, and people still doubt Jesus Christ's resurrection. And today
Mhm.
we're going to explore some questions that change the world forever. We're going to get to the bottom of the evidence that is presented that people kind of ignore and turn their eye away from. And the real question is why. So today I'll start with the basics. The basics of Christianity. We are going to go into the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are eyewitnesses that detail a lot, majority, I would even say close to all of the works of Jesus Christ and all of his teachings. So the reason the gospels are such an implemented part into the resurrection and a big key for evidence is because we start with Mark, right? He's the earliest gospel. He is likely written between 25 to 35 years of the crucifixion. And then we have Matthew and Mark using him as a citing source while also confirming other, details that would have been lost in translation when it came to the interpretations of the Bible over years and years and years. And lastly, we have John, which is around AD 85 through 95, which offers a more reflective eyewitness account, confirming and expanding on the earlier ones. So for me, this is very basic. And it's not to say it's not complex because the crucifixion, Jesus Christ in general, can be a very complex subject, but eyewitnesses are still used today. It's one of the major sources in how we understand and justify many things when people go in front of a judge, right? But
Mhm.
these eyewitnesses specifically are all accounting at different times. Yes, we can say that they knew each other and we can say that they had similar recollection, but being able to recall these details in such congruence to each other is remarkable. And so
Yeah.
there's many things that they have in common, like cultural customs, Jewish purification jars, Roman guard protocols. They list these things in their testimonials and in their reflections of what happened. This is something that you wouldn't know unless you were there. This is something that is not just public knowledge or things that at that time they didn't have Google. They're all reflecting on the same customs, names, and titles. They're consistent with the verified first century Jewish usage. And then we can go on to things like the Fox's Book of Martyrs, but I'll leave that for my next point. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, exactly. And the way I look at it is, for my first point, I'm looking at it as the resurrection of Jesus is a historical reality. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is, explained as a historical figure. He's explained as being a part of historical events. He's also based around other people who are considered historical figures and who caused historical events. Everyone knows people like Tiberius Caesar, um, you know, uh, Caesar who came before Tiberius, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So these are also people that historically we know were real people and who were alive, right? Just like the coin that they used when Jesus was alive, right? That was an actual Roman Caesar who lived at the same time Jesus was alive, right? So we know, in fact, Jesus is a historical person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can't count out, we can't, jump to this. He's a fairy tale when we, in fact, know that he was living during the time that other people who were historical figures and are historically proven to have lived at the same time he lived, right? So throw out Jesus not existing, that he's not real. Just throw that out because that just doesn't make any sense at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I see that the historical facts of, with Jesus, even among scholars, even most scholars who are non-believers, right? We're talking about non-believers that are scholars that study this, right? They in fact know that Jesus was crucified because he died under Pontius Pilate. Pontius
Right.
Pilate is also another historical figure, right? He really lived. So if he really lived, he is documented to say, hey, I am the one who basically gave the okay, gave the sign off for the death of Jesus, for the crucifixion of Jesus, right? We can verify a time period because of this Roman governor who was the one who signed off on the crucifixion of Jesus, right? These
Mhm.
are all important historical facts. So historical evidence and historical events points us to the crucifixion, right?
Right.
I just wanted to start there. And also the next point I'll go to is actually, I'll leave it there because I'm gonna go to the tomb and all that stuff. So, what do you think about these historical events?
I think the more context, the better. I
Yeah,
think that you're presenting some really, you know, underlying things when it comes down to proof and evidence, because
mhm.
we have to start to ask ourselves, what do we consider evidence? What do we
Yeah.
consider, am I lagging?
No.
I'm good.
Mhm.
Yeah, what do we consider things that we take into our logical minds to say that makes sense? Because sometimes I feel when people have this discussion, they're disingenuous because we always have the factor of like, let's leave the Bible out and let's leave the disciples out and let's leave your emotions out and how you feel about things and let's leave out anything that can support
Oh, you are lagging a
the
little bit.
Jesus. Huh? Yeah, it's
You are
it's
lagging
lagging
a
just
little
a
bit.
bit.
Yeah.
Let me 1 second. I'm gonna come back
Yeah,
in.
you're lagging a little bit. Yeah, and then come back because you were lagging a little bit. When you rejoin, you won't be lagging because you were lagging a little bit. So you'll be able to go back to your area once you join back in. All right, you're back. I'll add you to the stage. All right, you're good.
Am I okay?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay, so yeah, we have to be genuine in our assertion of what evidence actually can be presented to the table for a non-believer to accept it and understand with the open heart to really give the knowledge a real chance, because I think
Yeah,
sometimes we don't even get the chance to, as believers, as people who have studied the material, you don't get the chance to present a fair argument and present things in truth and fact, because right when you say, well, in the Bible it's like well, here it's but as any
mhm,
book, any source, any context, I should be able to use the source that is able to help me to help you understand. So
exactly.
we won't, for this, for my point, we won't use the Bible. We'll use the Fox's Book of Martyrs, an entire reflection of many, 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 many persecutions and murders. This book is very insufferable. Like, I've sat through my initial read of it. I was actually listening to it at the gym, and 45 minutes into my workout, I feel drained. I'm like,
Yeah, because it's telling you some things that we couldn't even fathom being in the 21st
no,
century that they did in the first century that if
yes,
you were a part of, you would know for a fact that this is something you couldn't make up
no,
because
it's
what
something.
they did, they you couldn't make this up.
It is brutal. We
Yeah.
sometimes minimize things, not saying that this is minimal, but we sometimes minimize things to beheading or, um, I don't know, lynching and things. And I'm not saying that those are light. I'm just saying those are common types of public assault and murder. But the Fox's Book of Martyrs, if y'all haven't got a chance to read it, especially as believers, it really shows um a consistent belief under persecution. And I think that that is a huge piece of evidence when it comes down to supporting the resurrection of Jesus Christ, because I couldn't tell you a time where I have made up or believed something independently that I have no proof of, or something that I couldn't see, that I couldn't actually, like something I could come off of easily, where I would be persecuted like this for it. These people were persecuted in upside down crosses. They were put in boiling oil. Their skin was ripped off. Their eyes were gouged out.
They even
Their
They even put them in coliseums, like coliseums for
And
them to
made
be.
them duel.
Yeah, they will have people come in. The Romans would come in, and they would watch them, get tore up by lions, all types of stuff. So they would literally get watched. You will have basically like a showing of
Mhm.
Christians getting martyred in front of everybody, and they thought this was fun.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to put yourself, you have to take it away from theology. You have to take
Mhm.
it away from belief, and we have to take this to history, right? As a human being, we have we have a need for survival. Fight or flight is not a joke, you know? And so
Exactly.
when you're putting a circumstance in front of me to say, either you're going to come off of this claim or you're going to be put in a coliseum to duel for your life. Let me tell you something about Tyshe Carson. I don't know, y'all soldiers out there and y'all ready to march and die on the heels of the lies you tell, but let me tell you something about me. If it didn't happen, you know what? I was playing. I was playing, and there is nothing good from my mouth. Matter of fact, I'm alive. Just put me. You know how they did John the Baptist? He was out there, and they was like, "He's crazy." Me too. I'm just crazy. Just leave me if it's not true. You know what I'm saying? But
Exactly.
these people had such conviction, such like will to like say, I cannot um go back on what I've seen. I have to stand up for what I've seen. And honestly, that really puts me in a frame of they were like, why are you so intimidated by this? It must be true. Like that you're pushing me to believe that you're gonna kill me because of me saying an event that I actually seen. Why? You know what I'm saying? What the real question is why? And I think that that's what they were asking at that time. Why? Why is this such a big deal? Why are y'all murdering hundreds and hundreds of Christians because of their beliefs? It's unheard of.
Exactly. Exactly. And what people are failing to understand is the time period. People fail to actually understand the time period, right? God, like I said, this is why he is the judge of the world, because he has perfect timing, right? He came in a time that was modern enough to have certain equipment, right? But not modern enough to not have certain equipment, right?
Mhm,
Because imagine if you saw this in the 21st century, right? You would automatically believe that it's fake because of AI, right?
mhm,
You have
yeah,
AI, you have phones, you have all these different types of stuff where you can use video and say, no, they made that up, right?
mhm,
So it makes sense why Jesus came in the first century at the time that he did, because it was too dangerous for someone to claim the claims that he claimed, and for someone to go through what he claimed and it not be true. What do I
mhm,
mean by that? The resurrection of Jesus is way too dangerous for it to be a fairy tale, because if the resurrection of Jesus was just a fairy tale, then it would be basically a completely different story, right?
yeah,
Because
right.
the patterns that they say that a fairy tale has is it's myth, right? Psychology and the social evolvement of a fairy tale would contradict what actually happened during this time Jesus was alive in his resurrection, right? So the early times of the Christianity and early times of Jesus is totally different than the narrative of a fairy tale, right? A fairy tale has a beginning, a middle, and a happy ending, right? Or a beginning and an end and not a happy ending, right? So the resurrection is not built like a fiction. It behaves like a historical event that broke a mold, right? So my first argument is no fairy tale is written to fail. What do I mean by that? You don't write fairy tales or a legend or a fake story for it to be broken into pieces, right? When you write a story about, let's say, for example, like Hercules, Hercules is a perfect example. Hercules has a story from beginning to end that when he started and when he ended, he was Hercules. No one is trying to debunk this. No one is trying to refute it. No one is trying to change the story of it. None of this. You know why? Because everyone knows that the historical uh, data based off of how Hercules was written, it was written as a fairy tale fiction. It's not true. So you're not going to try to debunk something that you know to be fiction, because the historical data tells you that there was never a Hercules, and the narrative is once upon a time Hercules.
Mhm,
This is not how Jesus' story is written, because he was an actual person. So with this being the narrative, right? Fairy tales have legends and myths, and they have inspiration for admiration, right? No one admired Jesus in his time. You built the story on Hercules or Zeus or any of these type of people. People admire this because they were built for admiration, right? When Jesus was alive, even still to this day, he wasn't built for admiration. He came here for division. He came here to spread the kingdom of God, right? Which people don't like. So his story automatically breaks the narrative of fairy tale because his story is not built for admiration, right? Which is why Judas betrayed him. Judas wanted him to be a story of admiration. Oh, Jesus, he came down, he's the Messiah. Now he's going to overthrow the Roman government. He's going to come through with a sword, right? This is what Judas wanted, and this is what a lot of the Jews wanted, right? But because Jesus didn't do that, they had disdain for him. They didn't like him. You know why? Because Jesus was an actual person and he was not a historical fiction. He was
Mhm.
a historical fact. So he did not have people that technically admired him except for his disciples, pretty much. And also, you have to understand he broke the molds at this time of women, right? Women sat at his feet at a time that this would be taboo, right? He broke the mold by Mary being the one who sent the news for his resurrection, right? So you're having a woman being a messenger in a time where this was taboo. And also, you are saying a fairy tale where your disciples are portrayed as cowards and doubters, right? Why would you make up a fake fairy tale about someone who's supposed to be a hero and a admiration of, right? But you have his followers as cowards and doubters, right? The reason you have this is because it's real. It's real life. In real life, people have real feelings and real emotions. So his disciples felt real feelings because they don't know what to do.
Mhm.
They're actually afraid because this is a real life situation. They're on the run for their lives because they said they're telling them, if you proclaim that Jesus is God and he resurrected, we will kill you.
Right.
So of course they would be afraid. No fiction will write a story like this for heroes to be cowardice. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, I think that you have to really understand how a legend or a myth is developed. It takes a long
Exactly.
time. It takes a long time. You know,
Exactly.
this is a game of telephone at some points. And so to see the first gospel written so quickly after his death, it's kind of like, okay, I died.
Thank
Let's
you.
I died, and then everyone seen me die. They seen me buried, right? And then a woman, like you state, a woman in at this time, women were their inputs were illegitimate.
Exactly.
So for it to be a woman, I think that Christ is so wise. God is so wise in the way that He does things because if it's taken serious and people are actually taking into account what's being said, and it's from the mouth of a woman, we have to look at that to say, why wasn't this easily dismissed? Right? Why didn't you people just go check the tomb? Like everybody's saying he's risen, he's risen. Didn't y'all see him murdered? Y'all seen him crucified, right? Y'all seen him put in his tomb. He was in his tomb. So now we're all in the same place. Y'all, it happened here. Y'all witnessed it here, and now in the same place. I'm telling you, he's risen. Let's just go check. Is that not common sense? Like, why did
Exactly. And they
nobody know
did.
that he's exactly they did? But what I'm saying is, if it didn't happen, we should have at least an ample amount of people to say, I seen him still in his tomb. He was still
Mhm.
there, right?
Exactly. But because they didn't see him in his tomb, when they went to his tomb and they didn't see him in his tomb, they're like, he's gone. So the only explanation for him being gone and not being in his tomb is they stole his body. That's the only way. He's
Hmm.
still dead, but his disciples stole his body. They moved this big old rock out the way and they stole his body. That's how Jesus is not in his tomb. Come on now.
And that's quite the theory. But even then, right? They stole his body and they kept it and buried it on their own, right? Let's say
Yeah,
that is the fact. Where is it? It's
exactly.
been thousands of years. Where's the body?
Exactly.
No one can find the body. The body
Exactly.
disappears, right? And this goes into a whole I'll touch on it later, but this is one thing I wanted to touch on, that again, because my initial points are outside of the Bible, for people who are like, oh, the Bible, you can't basically prove a point with the point, right? That's what a
And
lot of people.
I'm going to use the Bible and the Old Testament to prove how I know Jesus died and resurrected without even using the Old Testament, which is the gospel of Jesus. But I'm going to use the Old Testament way before Jesus was born to prove his death and resurrection.
I'm excited. Hold on, let me just say my little point. So listen, Josephus, right? Jewish
Yeah.
historian. I want to read y'all his account. So um this is what Josephus says. Now there was a time Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when Pilate, at suggestion of the principal men among us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again the third day as the divine prophets, and foretold these and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. And the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct to this day. This is Antiquities of the Jews. And so this is a big piece from Jewish and secular scholars who accept this as authentic because it matches his Josephus style and tone for authenticity. You have to look at this from a historical perspective, is what I'm saying. People who are not even Christian, who weren't his followers, who weren't his disciples, are accounting for a historical event. They're not just accounting for something willy-nilly that happened or something because I loved him, so I'm going to write something to prove that this happened because I loved him and he was a great teacher to me. No, this is a Jewish historian who's accounting for this historically. So go ahead. What were you going to say?
Exactly. And just to add to that, more evidence of his resurrection is, evaluating the explanations, right? So one
Mm-hmm.
of the explanations, like I just said, is the disciples stole his body, is what they proclaim, right? But let's just say, even if they did steal his body, which is not true, but let's just say that even if they did steal his body, this still does not explain the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus.
Right.
Even if they stole his body, right? Let's say they took his body out of the tomb, people still proclaimed to have seen Christ risen,
Mm-hmm.
walking around, being able to see him after his crucifixion. So even if you want to take up on that explanation, say, well, they stole his body, that's the reason why his body's not in the tomb. Explain to me how the people, over 500 people, still proclaim to have seen him alive.
Mm-hmm.
This makes no sense, right? And it doesn't fit their willingness to die for what they know to be false, right? They were willing to die for this claim. They were told, if you keep telling people to believe that Christ is risen, we will execute you. And they said, that's fine. You have to understand the mentality of a person who believed in something so much. And this is how you know that Jesus is divine, right? Even if you were to see something today, like let's say you see a soldier, right, and you seen him do some heroic things, right, and you say, I believe that soldier is strong, or I believe that soldier is a good soldier, he's a good shooter, he's a good sniper, whatever the case may be, right? Even if that soldier is great at his job, right, you're not going to be willing to say, well, he's such a good soldier, I'll die for him. Do you know why? Because he did not die and resurrect, even though he was great at his job. So this shows you the fact that they saw something beyond human nature, which is
Mm-hmm.
the divinity of Christ, because they're saying, I'm willing to die for what I saw. So much so because of the fact that they seen something that is unexplainable. That's unexplainable. So this proves his divinity, right? And Jewish leaders, showing that the tomb was empty, even the ones who were, Jesus's opponents, right? Jesus's people who did not like him, right? Even they confessed, the Pharisees and the Sadducees confessed his tomb is empty. We don't know how, but his tomb is empty, right?
Mhm.
So this shows you that it makes zero sense. And they say that the disciples were hallucinating, and then the 500 people who saw him were hallucinating. So that doesn't explain the empty tomb still. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it doesn't explain the empty tomb, and even if it doesn't matter what they believe happened to Jesus' body, it still leaves room for doubt. And I think
Exactly.
to be so adamant about it didn't happen and this and that from the account, the room for doubt is what a lot in the court of law, that's what you hoping for. If you are trying to defend yourself in the court of law, you're looking for reasonable doubt. That's what you're looking for. But we're so disingenuous as people because we have this envious spirit when it comes down to this perfect person who loved us and who we continue to betray. And because we continue to do these things over and over again, it's like a sense of shame, I think,
Yeah.
that comes with actually accepting Jesus as Lord. And so one of the another one of the people that I wanted to speak on is Tacitus, which was a Roman historian. So we have
Yeah.
um, Josephus, which was a Jewish historian, and now we have a Roman historian, which is Tacitus, and he confirms Jesus' execution under Pontius Pilate, and he was widely regarded as one of the most reliable and careful historians of the ancient world. And he wrote Annals, and he was not Christian. In fact, he despised Christianity, which makes
Mm.
his testimony very powerful. This is what he says. Christus, which is from the name of Christians at its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate, and a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but in Rome, where things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular. So this
Mm.
explores that Jesus, one, existed because he's talking about the origin of Christians. And then it confirms the executed order from Pontius Pilate. Pilate, is it Pilate? It's Pilate.
Pontius Pilate. Yeah, yeah. It's Pontius Pilate.
And then it confirms the time frame of which the Gospels were recorded. And then it confirms a mischievous superstition broke out again, a rapid spread of Christianity. So the question is, what would cause a rapid spread of Christianity? Something historical, something
Exactly.
amazing, I'm
Yep.
guessing, right? And
Yes, 100%.
there's not that many things in my head as a believer in Christ today. It would take something monumental, something. I don't think there's anything that could change my view or my faith or my belief, especially if I'm in practice. This is something I love, something I believe in, something I'm in community with my family about. This is
Yeah.
something that if I was to turn against it, I would be disowned probably by everybody I love. And for that, I don't think there's anything that could really sway me unless I see somebody rise from the dead.
Exactly.
I see somebody rise from the dead. We could talk about something. I see
Mhm.
you do I see you suffer a Roman crucifixion. I see you in your tomb. I see them bury you, and your tomb is empty. I hear the accounts of your tomb being empty. This right here is already speculation. Now my wheels is turning at this point. But then you tell me, hundreds of people see this man. Okay,